everyone and welcome to UzReport World News with me, Davron Jumaev. The Federation of Consumer Protection Societies of Uzbekistan is engaged in the development of a consumer price basket, partly based on a survey among the country's population. Its research study has concluded that the monthly basket for the Uzbek resident could have a value of around $200. The average wage in the country is around $250. The basket is comprised of bread products, cereals, legumes, meat, vegetables, melons, fruit, dairy products and transportation costs, among other items. It was drawn up for three socio-demographic groups: the working age population, retired persons and children. Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev in June last year instructed economic development and poverty reduction officials to develop within 3 months a normative legal framework for the living wage and a minimal consumer basket. Tajikistan plans to buy 250 million cubic meters of natural gas from Uzbekistan in 2021. Tajik Transgas Vice Chairman Shavkat Shoimov said on Wednesday. The agreement on delivery of 250 million cubic meters of gas was purchased between Tajik Transgas and Uztransgas, he told reporters. This is 11% more than the volume of gas imported last year. Tajikistan increased import of gas from Uzbekistan by 40% in 2020 and purchased 225 million cubic meters of gas. Many enterprises in the north of the country received gas for the first time for the past 10 years. Around 20 enterprises are engaged in gas production in Tajikistan to date. Uzbekistan's gas imports surged 237.1 times in 2020 compared to the previous year, according to the country's State Statistics Committee. Gas worth $50.4 million was imported. The Uzbek government is taking actions on supporting its immigrants both financially and physically. The area that government is focused on is education and trainings for immigrants to travel and work outside of the country. According to the State Statistics Committee, 71% of Uzbek migrants currently live in Russia. Uzbek migrants also live and work in such countries as Kazakhstan, Korea, Turkey, UAE and others. Since January 1, 2021, a procedure has been introduced for compulsory vocational training for persons traveling abroad for labor migration. In addition to that, from 2021, legal migrants are equated to self-employed. They can voluntarily pay social tax to calculate their subsequent pension. Comparing the last year's statistics, the number of migrants has decreased significantly due to the pandemic. The borders were closed by several countries, including those who are considered to be most visited by Uzbek immigrants. These are Russia, Kazakhstan, South Korea, Turkey and UAE. Uzbekistan ranked 155th out of 167 in the Economist Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index. The country improved its positions compared to 2019 but remained in the group of states with an authoritarian regime.
Uzbekistan scored 2.12 points, having improved its position compared to 2019. Experts rated the quality of the electoral process and pluralism at 0.8 points out of 10, government performance at 1.86 points, political participation at 2.78 points, political culture at 5 points, and civil liberties at 0.88 points. In the overall index, the best indicator among Central Asian states belongs to Kyrgyzstan, with Kazakhstan being placed 128th, Tajikistan 159th, and Turkmenistan being the country with the worst democracy. The Eastern Europe region, which includes 28 states, Uzbekistan was ranked 26th, followed by Tajikistan and Turkmenistan. Kazakhstan was placed 23rd, Kyrgyzstan 21st. In 2020, Eastern Europe's average regional score in the Democracy Index declined to 5.36, compared with 5.42 in 2019.
Uzbekistan's State Tax Committee has launched a due diligence service to help entrepreneurs conduct checks on the legality of the activities conducted by their business partners. So far, the committee has reported 396 companies of suspicious behavior.
The check will help the entrepreneurs verify the counterparty's ability to fulfill obligations under the transaction. Besides, the data collects information on corresponding production and personnel presence, as well as a report on the counterparty's business reputation and financial condition. The user may also check whether the counterparty is registered as a VAT payer. Thus, 396 enterprises made dubious transactions, where the tax amount was illegally reduced. These for-profit businesses had not paid taxes on the amount of 100 million sums, or approximately $9.5 thousand US. Frequent change of legal address is also a matter of concern when implemented without a probable cause. Criteria includes the production of high volume of work in a short period of time from the establishment date, understating the number of official employees, storage, use, and sale of unregistered goods, initiation bankruptcy as a result of the merger of other firms with unpaid taxes.
The import of electric vehicles boomed in Uzbekistan in the last 2 years. In 2019, 13 electric vehicles were imported. In 2020, this figure reached 131.
The State Statistics Committee reported that the government spent $2.9 million on electric vehicles last year. Most of the electric cars were brought from China. There were also deliveries from South Korea, Georgia, USA, and Germany. In the capital city of Tashkent, 2 charging stations have been installed for electric cars. In the current year, the government plans to install the first 2 fast charging systems.
Uzbekistan will receive 2.6 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccine as part of the global COVAX program. The vaccine will cost approximately $3 per dose. It is planned that the supply of the vaccine will begin by the end of the first quarter, and the bulk will be delivered by the middle of this year. It is a vector vaccine. The principle of operation of vector vaccines is that they contain a weakened harmless virus and a new type of coronavirus gene. The number of patients infected with coronavirus as of February 4 stood at 78,916. The recovery rate in the country currently stays at 98%. South Korea has excluded Uzbekistan from the list of epidemically unfavorable countries. Due to the improved epidemiological situation, the republic is no longer in the red zone for COVID-19 cases. The Agency for External Labor Migration entered into negotiations with the corresponding departments of the Republic of Korea to agree on the procedure for the organized entry of Uzbek citizens whose visa confirmation has not expired. Uzbekistan made its first steps towards the development of Islamic finance last year. At an online meeting held recently by a leading expert, the community of investment and financial analysts in Uzbekistan gained knowledge in the field.
Как вам всем известно, проект постановления президента.
As you all know, the draft presidential decree on the introduction of the Sukuk certificate is now being approved by the Ministry of Investment. After that, we'll bring it to the Cabinet of Ministers, and I really hope that in the future, maybe a month or 2, we will be able to publicly discuss this document.
Агностик, атеист, каждый из вас может прийти в исламский.
No matter who you are, Buddhist, Christian, agnostic or atheist, each of you will be able to come to the Islamic Bank and receive financing. Ethiopia, a country where almost 70% are Christians, they already have 2 Islamic banks, a number of Islamic financial institutions. Further, using diagrams, the participants of the seminar were shown the volume of assets of the Islamic financial system. To date, this is $3.5 trillion. 70% of the volume goes through the Islamic banks, and 20% is Sukuk. The main countries where Islamic finance is developing are Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Malaysia. The basis of Islamic finance is the distribution of profits and losses. Rewards and risks should be shared fairly between partners. Also, the list of characteristics was supplemented by compliance with the principles and rules of Islamic law, a ban on financing harmful and immoral activities, as well as payment in the form of 2.5% of certain assets to the Fund for Assistance to the Needy.
Производство реальных экономических благ.
This is a specific redistributive function of Islam, that the rich should pay to the poor and that money goes back to the economy. Thus, Islam solves the problem of stratification between rich and poor.
High levels of antibodies have been found in almost all people infected with COVID-19 for at least 6 months, according to a major UK study. The results showed that 99% of participants retained antibodies for 3 months and 88% still had them after 6 months. Scientists say the results should provide some reassurance that swift cases of reinfection will be rare. Naomi Allen, a professor and chief scientist at UK Biobank who conducted the study, said that although we cannot be certain how this relates to immunity, the results suggest that people may be protected against subsequent infection for at least 6 months following natural infection. On Wednesday, a preprint study showed that just one shot of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine provided sustained protection for 3 months. It showed a 76% efficacy until a second shot was given, and higher efficacy if the second dose was given at least 12 weeks after the first.
Now that is really good news.
Health Secretary Matt Hancock used this to defend the country's vaccine rollout strategy. Britain has extended the gap between doses and given the shot to people of all ages, whereas France, Belgium and Germany recommend that Oxford's vaccine is only given to under 65s. Director of the Oxford Vaccine Group, Andrew Pollard, said the study was also a success for reducing transmission.
Well, that could have a really important impact in that it reduces the chances of someone who's exposed getting the infection, and if they don't get the infection, they can't pass it on. So it decreases the risk of transmission in the population.
The study's findings are only preliminary and still under review. It may support Britain's decision to separate doses, but it did not give extra direct evidence of efficacy in older people.
Russia is accusing the West of descending into hysteria over the jailing of opposition politician Alexei Navalny. The Kremlin also says police had been right to use force to break up protests over his imprisonment. On Tuesday, a Moscow court sentenced the prominent critic of President Vladimir Putin to 3.5 years for parole violations. Navalny says the charges are trumped up to sideline him. His supporters had tried to gather to show support during the ruling and then took to the streets afterwards to protest. Russian authorities shut down some central metro stations and detained more than 1,400 people. Meanwhile, the German government has said it's not ruling out further sanctions against Russia over the verdict. Chancellor Angela Merkel said the decision against Navalny is, quote, far from any rule of law standards, and demanded an end to violence against peaceful protesters in Russia. This is her spokesman saying that further steps would be discussed with its European partners.
And exhale. The Netherlands will introduce rapid COVID-19 breath tests to sites across the country to speed up the testing process and make it less intrusive. Facilities in Amsterdam started using the Spironose this week, a machine which requires a person to breathe into it to indicate a possible coronavirus infection within a minute. Marieke van der Lubben from Amsterdam's Municipal Health Services says that after months of trials, Dutch health authorities found the machine to be reliable in the case of negative test results. A positive test needed to be followed by a regular PCR test to establish whether the detected infection was caused by the coronavirus.
I think that, of course, it's much nicer to have this test than this swab in your nose and in your throat. So I hope that people will visit our test facility more often. So that's a good thing.
Indonesia also launched a similar screening program at train stations on Wednesday. Their breathalyzer, known as Genos, was developed by the University of Gadjah Mada, which says it has at least 95% accuracy. Subjects are required to blow into a bag and the result is available in just 2 minutes, though again, results need to be confirmed with a PCR test. Although there are shortcomings, an epidemiologist from Australia's Griffith University says the breathalyzer is promising and has potential to help with COVID-19 detection.
The U.S. labor market recovery appears to be back on track. The ADP National Employment Report said Wednesday U.S. private payrolls rose by 174,000 jobs last month. That's more than triple what economists had forecast. And it's a sharp rebound from the drop of 78,000 jobs in December. The nearly $900 billion in additional relief provided by the government at year-end likely propelled the increase in hiring. The services sector bounced back as the leisure and hospitality industry that had been earlier hit hard by the lockdowns added 35,000 jobs. The easing of restrictions on businesses has offered hope of faster job growth in the months ahead. The economy has recouped a little more than half of the 22 million jobs lost in March and April. The Congressional Budget Office estimates employment won't return to pre-recession levels before 2024. Investors get the full picture Friday when the Labor Department issues its January employment report. Economists expect an increase of 50,000 jobs.
The UK launched a trial on Thursday to test the effectiveness of mixing two different COVID-19 vaccines. Participants will be given one vaccine dose followed by a second booster shot of a different vaccine. The trial will combine the AstraZeneca Oxford University vaccine with the Pfizer-BioNTech one. Scientists will assess the participants' immune response, as well as monitor for any unexpected side effects. About 800 volunteers over the age of 50 are being recruited to take part in the trial, with results expected in June. AstraZeneca's shot is also being tested in combination with Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. British researchers said the study was crucial for understanding whether vaccines can be rolled out with greater flexibility around the world, particularly as the steady supply of vaccines is always in question. Matthew Snape, an Oxford vaccinologist who is leading the trial, said the results could inform vaccine deployment in the second half of the year. The UK reached a milestone on Wednesday of vaccinating more than 10 million people against coronavirus.
Nearly 13,000 American Airlines employees are at risk of furlough starting April 1st, when the U.S. aid package for airline workers is set to expire. The airline blames a travel slump on slow vaccine rollouts and new international COVID-19 restrictions. In a company-wide memo, CEO Doug Parker and President Robert Isom told employees, "We are nearly 5 weeks in 2021, and unfortunately we find ourselves in a situation similar to much of 2020. Furlough warnings went to over 1,800 pilots and 4,000 flight attendants. 19,000 American Airlines workers were already furloughed when the first federal payout of the global health crisis expired in October. They were recalled in December when the latest $15 billion aid package was passed, enough to pay their incomes through March. But as the April deadline approaches, aviation unions are pushing for another $15 billion to protect jobs through the summer. United Airlines is also sending a fresh round of furlough warnings to 14,000 employees, as they're required by law to inform employees who might lose their jobs within 60 days. Meanwhile, Delta and Southwest have mostly avoided layoffs through voluntary leave programs.
The S&P 500 barely managed to log a third straight session of gains Wednesday as the major indexes closed nearly flat. The gain came amid improving economic data and progress on a fiscal stimulus package. Private payrolls rebounded sharply in January, and services activity raced to its highest level in nearly 2 years. In Washington, President Joe Biden met with congressional Democrats preparing to push his $1.9 trillion relief plan. Clear Harbor Asset Management CEO Aaron Kennan.
One key component to this rally is at some point, I think it was late this morning, we did see the Senate agree on this reconciliation process, which essentially allows for the Democrats with their votes and with the vice president to pass the Biden administration's fiscal stimulus package, which is probably going to be in and around $1.9 trillion. We think that's generally a net positive for the equity market.
The Dow and S&P tacked on 0.1%. The Nasdaq ended a tad below the break-even line. GameStop rose a modest 2.7%. The frantic swings in the video game retailer's stock price subsided Wednesday as it rebounded some from Tuesday's 60% plunge. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen will meet with top officials this week to discuss some market volatility driven by retail trading in GameStop, silver, and other heavily shorted stocks. Shares of Alphabet jumped 7%. The advertising and cloud businesses of Google's parent profited as people worked and studied online from home. But shares of Spotify fell 8%. The streaming music company expressed uncertainty over how much longer it would benefit from the health crisis that kept people at home and boosted the number of subscribers.
These were the top headlines for today. Stay safe and goodbye.